Okay. So I'm going to tell a bit of a story here. So one of the many hard to swallow parts of my experience, and there are several, I'm aware of that, is that I continue to have telepathy with the elder. She is a real presence in my life now and displays herself in paranormal fashion. Actually, she's probably listening. And now, fascinatingly, others have experienced her as well. Suzy is one of them, and I'll get to that in a second. It's actually fascinating to talk about um, that three people have had firsthand experience with the elder in paranormal form. All three of those people had gray alien contact. All three considered themselves to have gray alien genetics, and all three had mediumship abilities. So that's just very fascinating. The first, I'm going to tell the details of the story here. The first was someone at a CE5, and this was in the early days of me speaking publicly. I met another contactee, and then we met for lunch outside of the group. And upon going to meet them, I could feel the elder herself was inquisitive. Like, who is this person? Who is this? Who's Jeff meeting? And she kind of had this inquisitiveness about it. And in those early days, they were sensitive to who I was interacting with, and the idea that they didn't want me to have outside influence. As I say that I was not an aliens and UFO guy on my website, that was something that they liked, that I didn't come to the memories with preconceived ideas. So when I arrived for lunch, we eventually got into great conversations, and he was a very, very professional person. Actually, he worked for the United Nations, and he turned out to be a very powerful medium, a highly sensitive medium, who, part of his side job was to help others and help others heal through, other people who have passed on who were important to them. And kind of closer to the end of the conversation, I mentioned that I had a guru. I have a guru, and he says, "Oh, is your guru a female?" I said, "No, it's not." And he said, "Oh, well, I could feel a female spirit presence inquiring who I was, like suspicious about me, before we met." And at the time, I was like, "Oh yeah, that's the elder," and I kind of just thought of it as an interesting kind of side joke, and didn't really think about it too much. But it was kind of just one of the first moments that someone else had experienced her. The second was a contactee that we featured here on Vancouver UFO. And in a private conversation, me and this contactee and the elder had a three-way conversation. I heard a communication with the elder. Then she had a communication, the contactee, with the elder. Then the elder told me about the communication, and then the contactee told me about the communication. And then since at that point, that contactee was sensitive to specific moments in my life when I was interacting with the elder. Like, she could pick up on it, and all of a sudden I would receive a text. I would never talk to that contactee for months, and she would literally just send a text saying, "Listen to your elder," and it was just really random, and it would be very specific about moments I was going through with something that I might have been aware of with communication wise. So me and Suzy had an experience as well too, and it goes like this. So, as the first edition of the book was being published, right before the cover was being completed, one night I had a very strong telepathic communication from the elder, from both the elder and the leader. Now, even crazier, right? I have it from both of them, from that kind of mantis entity, and then also from the elder herself. And that night, they kind of both were there, very strong, and they told me to write down a passage, and it goes like this. It's not to dominate you. It's to change to societal structures that benefit you, and to change to societal structures that benefit nature. There are ways that are very advanced for society to coexist, but they are reorientations of your sense of self because they involve consciousness technology. And then they kind of said, they were actually really emphatic, put that on the back of the book. So that's the origin of this line, which is now graces both the back of the front edition, the first edition, and the second edition. And it sticks out in a weird way in the book. I kind of just say it offhandedly that I was told this, and I mentioned it in the chapter about my 25th contact event in the first book. And I didn't really know what to do with this line. Though it was very impactful, it was not from a contact event. So it kind of just sat on its own in this kind of weird way. Well, one day I was putting together the last chapter of the new edition, the chapter on the city, and I had these collections of paragraphs that me and Suzy were going through over Zoom, one by one. And I was reading them out while Suzy saw them on her screen. By the way, Suzy had absolutely no background knowledge about this unique line that comes from the book. And when we approached this line, I began reading it out loud, and then something happened. Suzy, do you want to explain that part?
Yes, we'd been puzzling over the inclusion of certain paragraphs, etc., and the sense that they could be expressed in. And when Jeff read that out, I saw this distinct little ball of light, probably about 1.5 centimeters in diameter, and it just came zooming in on my left. It came right in my line of vision, passed across my screen, and disappeared. And it didn't do that in a flash. It kind of took its time, and while it was taking its time, I was receiving this little stream of information and feelings and emotions, which I described to Jeff. And I said to him, "I think this is the elder," and he said yes. He agreed, and I was able to actually state to him the way she felt about him, the way she viewed him, her affection for him, etc. And those were all things that he recognized and identified with. And so it really confirmed to us that that this was a very important paragraph, and perhaps as things unfold in disclosure and in the contact arena, that this will become more and more of an important statement to quell a lot of fears and the idea of a threat to humanity.
Great. That's great, Suzy. Thank you. Yeah, it was just one of those magical moments. And yeah, it just you know, the contact, the phenomenon is magical, and it's very beautiful when it's interacting with us.